brace yourselves, everyone. The collapse isn't coming, and there is nothing that the Mets can do about it. Because what transpired today was the most vintage win for the Padres and vintage loss for the Mets you'll ever see. Now, does this even crack into the top 7 of most devastating losses for the Mets this season? Absolutely not. I mean, you had a game where they were up 9-5 in the middle of the ninth, and they blew that. You had a game where they were up 6-2 after 7, and they found a way to blow that, even when they were down by 1 with bases loaded, 1 out in the bottom of the ninth. You had a game where they were up 3-0 and lost 6-3 in extras. That was a brutal loss. You had blown leads of 6-1, 7-2, 5-0. I mean, you have games for the Mets where like they literally get so close in extras, only to then give up 5 runs, after getting so close. There's been a lot of horrible losses for the Mets, but this is definitely up there as a really bad loss because not only the Mets bullpen blew it, but it was by Buto and Diaz, who coming into the series, some of the most reliable bullpen members that we have. Like, Diaz has been playing incredible baseball as of late. Ever since his May catastrophes, his last major catastrophe that I remember was May 25th against the Giants. And, that blown save. And then, obviously suspension was horrible. But now it's like he's been playing really good baseball and he just blew it on a walk-off for the Padres. So after the Mets got 2 walk-offs, they got walked off themselves. And they blew a 2-0 lead in the middle of the 8th in the process, having a statistical 87.2% chance to win. Now, the Mets have blown a 98.7% chance to win before, so this is nothing compared to that. But still, in 7 out of 8 scenarios, the Mets win this game. Nonetheless, they could not avoid their most vintage loss. So the Mets still have not won a Sunday game since the 7th of July. They could not get a series win against the San Diego Padres to keep up their momentum. They cannot get back to 7 above 500, and they remain 2.5 out of the playoff race. So, as for the Mets, you need to just look at what the hell went wrong. Because on July 26th, after their win against the Braves, I know Single went down. But still, the Mets were 1.5 games into a playoff position. Had the first wild card since the season ended that day, they would have hosted a playoff series. They were only like 6.5 back in the division at that point. So they looked like they were within striking distance of capturing the division from the Philadelphia Phillies. And now, they're 8.5 back in the division. They're 2.5 out of even the third playoff spot. And there's a lot less time now. Like, the Mets collapsed. From their peak of 55 and 48. And look, they were able to get back to 7 above 500 at points, like when they were 57 and 50, 58 and 51. And I think the most recent one they got to was 61 and 54. But even then, they were only in the third wild card spot. They were not able to get back into the first wild card spot. Only the third. I mean, even when they were 48 and 45, they were still in the second wild card spot at that point. Obviously, the bar for making the playoffs looks like it's going to be an intense one. Nonetheless, the Mets are just like fizzling out. Like they're literally fizzling out. So what went wrong? Well, the Mets could not capitalize on taking the first 2 games against the Braves, as they only split the series. Obviously, that was McGeel's last start until Blackburn got injured, seeing as McGeel is awful, and the Mets offense also could not do anything. When they finally did something, it came much too late as Peterson and the bullpen shit the bed on the next game against the Braves. July 29th, though, the Mets tried to put this past them as they clobber the Twins 15-2. And they are able to shut them out the next day, but July 31st, they lose and fall completely out of the playoff race for the first time since July 11th. They do get back in it after an August 2nd win over the Angels, have a you know things are getting bad for the Mets when they lose that series to the Angels. Because if they could win that series, it's like everything's fine. It was just a blip, and they can hold on to their playoff spot. Instead, JD Martinez hits a grand slam, and Brazoban gives up the lead the very next half inning. So, again, another horrible loss for the Mets. And they also blew a lead the next game against the Angels on August 4th. That really knocks them down. They do shut out the Cardinals on the 5th, and they do take 2 out of 3 from the Rockies, but it's still not looking great for the Mets heading into Seattle. Now, the Seattle series is where you can really begin to say that the Mets season was over. They got swept by the Mariners, and they put up 1 run that entire series and allowed 22. And the fact that when they came back, they only took 2 out of 3 from or 1 out of 3 from the Athletics really says something. Now, part of this is that it's not just the fact that you lose, it's how you lose. But, I mean, obviously getting swept is pretty inexcusable. But, I mean, you look at these games, it's like the Mets offense was so streaky and inconsistent, and in June and July, I guess these problems got masked, but in August, they began showing in full swing. I mean, you know, like they began to really show some of the ugly truths about the Mets. And even when they were in a playoff spot, I could tell something was, you know, bad. They were struggling to hit with runners in scoring position. And that's a big problem. You know, especially with Seattle's good pitching, which they got lit up by, but they also lit up the Mariners' offense, which was really bad, and was a big reason why the Mariners were losing so many games, was because they didn't have an offense, and they just lit up the Mets. I mean, they lit up Severino, who I get is inconsistent, but still, they lit him up. They lit up, who else did they light up? I don't know who else they lit up, but they lit up 2 of the pitchers really badly, and they lit up the bullpen too. Like, lit them up. I mean, like, it was just bad for the Mets. It was just, like, bad in that Seattle series. And then against the Athletics, Paul Blackburn shits the bed, and then Quintana and Reed Garrett shit the bed 2 days later, so they can only get away with 1 win. And obviously, when you're up 5-0, you can't, like, let that fade away from you and lose a game like that. So then, it's like, okay, they're down to 62-59. They have a lot of work to do, but as long as the Braves don't do well, guess what? They won their 2 series against the Phillies and against the Nationals. I think they won a series before that, too. Now, for the Mets, you know, in their defense, they did win the series against the Miami Marlins, although that loss was still a really bad one because the bullpen caved in when they had a 2-1 lead. But, whatever. And, of course, Lindor hit a 404-foot bomb that was a flyout because he hit it in just the wrong spot. Then, of course, you have the Orioles series where they actually get vintage clutch wins in 2 of them and lose 1. But I was like, okay, maybe the Mets could turn around a series, 66-61, and then they split with the Padres. And look, normally a split with the Padres, especially if the Braves were to continue to struggle, I wouldn't be that upset over. But it's the fact that the Mets had this within their control. Blackburn shit the bed and got injured, and honestly, at this point, McGill might be better than Blackburn. He might. He genuinely might be better than Blackburn. And now they wasted a great start by Jose Quintana, who has been really bad recently and finally had himself a good game. And they could not capitalize because the bullpen shit the bed. I mean, that's just inexcusable. And the Mets at so many points had runners in scoring position, and they could not capitalize on those either. Like, that was just bad. Couldn't even extend the game into extra innings. Could not even extend the game into extra innings. And of course, with how reliable these bullpen members is, it makes it even worse. Now they're 68 and 63, and again, 2.5 back of the playoffs. Do I think that they'll make it? Definitely not. Yes, the Mets technically control their own destiny. But if the Braves win, then the best the Mets and Braves can do is tie if the Braves win out except for the Mets series, and then the Mets win out from there. But it's looking really unlikely now. The Mets are rapidly losing control of their own destiny. The Braves are waking up, and, they're getting some good hitters back. Like, the Braves are waking up. The Mets have to start worrying about teams like the Cubs, the Cardinals, the Giants. I mean, they have to worry about the Giants and Cardinals for a while. They have to worry about those teams jumping them. Especially a team like the San Francisco Giants, who, has a tiebreaker over the Mets. At least with the Cardinals and Cubs, the Mets can fend those teams off with a tiebreaker. And yes, they do have a tiebreaker with the Padres if, for some reason, the Padres have a huge collapse down the stretch. But just like the Rockies could beat the Padres in a series. There's really no excuses for this one. And now you have to look at who they're playing next, which is the Diamondbacks, who have won 6 games in a row, came back from being down 4-0 twice to the Red Sox, and also came back from being down 6-3 to the Miami Marlins. So, yeah, not exactly pretty for the Arizona, for the New York Mets with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I will say they did take a really bad sweep to the Tampa Bay Rays, but they've looked really good since then. Now, there are a few reasons to be optimistic about this. The Mets are only coming from San Diego, whereas the Diamondbacks have to come from Boston. If anyone's going to be jet lagged, it's going to be the Diamondbacks. The Mets have a day off to rest. And their pitching staff might be able to do well. They might be able to. But I'm not sure. Minaya, he's normally pretty good, but is he going to be able to keep up? Severino, he can get lit up at times. And I mean lit up. We saw what happened on July 5th against the Pirates when he had 7 earned runs in that game. We saw him getting lit up on July 31st against the Minnesota Twins. He got lit up badly. In the August 6th loss to the Colorado Rockies. And obviously that game in Seattle, pathetic and unacceptable. So, I don't know. Severino has pitched great against the Marlins and Padres recently, and he pitched pretty well against the Braves, but he's not consistent. And against this very good D-backs offense, I just think that he's going to shit the bed. Minaya, I think, has a chance of winning. The Thursday pitcher is still undecisive. What the Mets have to do is that since they have a day off, they could use David Peterson and save McGill for the White Sox game. This is what I would do. This is what I would do without a second thought about it. Yes, I get that you guys need rest, but it's 5 days, and McGill is not nearly as good as Peterson. You want Peterson in there against the D-backs, and you save McGill for the White Sox when there's a chance he could still win against the White Sox with how putrid that team has been this entire season. If you use McGill on Thursday, you pretty much guarantee that you're losing on Thursday, and while there's still a very good chance that you win on Friday, you need to win that D-backs game, just because there's a very good chance that the count goes to 3-3 in a season series before that happens, if they split the first 2 games with the Mets and D-backs splitting a 4-game series. And, while the White Sox are an easy team, they could stun the Mets too. And if the Mets get swept, they're falling to 2 above. 2 above, and that's it. And then you look at the rest of the schedule. In September, I think that's the Red Sox, Reds, and Blue Jays. Not sure what order it is. And the Red Sox, they're still hanging around in there in the playoff race. I don't think they're going to get it. They're falling way out of it like the Mets are, but they're still hanging around, even though they're collapsing. The what's it called? The Reds. I mean, the Mets took 2 out of 3 of them early in the season, but I don't know how they're going to play against them, now. And the Blue Jays, I mean, they're a pretty bad team, but again, you never know. And then they got to play the Phillies and the Nationals. And obviously the Phillies is going to be a very hard series for the Mets, just because this Phillies series is going to be on the road. Nationals, I think, should be the easiest series that the Mets have in this closing stretch. And then you got the Phillies, Braves, and Brewers. Phillies are the Phillies, and you can never really count them out. Brewers swept the Mets early in the season, and now they play Milwaukee. Braves, well, every time the Mets and the Braves face off in a series, even if this has implications, which I don't think it will, because the Mets could find themselves totally eliminated or very close to being totally eliminated by this point in time. Like, they could really be out of the playoff picture by this point. They could really suffer, just that big of a collapse. And look, if the Mets collapse, it's a collapse, but it's not like it's even their second worst collapse in the last 4 years. 2021, you were 35-25, and you had first place for 103 days, and you couldn't even finish the winning record. That's historical. 2022, you get 101 wins, but you get swept by the Braves, so you lose that on the division, and then you lose in the wild card round to the Padres. That's historic. 2023, it's not historic, but you start off 14-7, and then you finish 75-87. And even though it wasn't a historic, collapse from an in-season perspective, it was a historic collapse from drop-offs from 100 wins before. And, the Mets started off 24-35, and they climbed back to a postseason position. But they're letting go of it rapidly. And they're really wasting a potential MVP candidate in Francisco Lindor. Because I think Lindor has a chance to win MVP over Shohei Ohtani, especially if Ohtani can't reach 50 stolen bases and 50 home runs. There's a chance. There's a chance. Especially because Ohtani can't pitch this year, so he's just a designated hitter. But it's really tough to say. And I think the Mets really have to make the playoffs, so at least get damn close to even give Lindor a shot at winning MVP. Which, again, I really want to see him win MVP, just because no player for the New York Mets has ever won an MVP award. So Lindor being the first would truly be something special. And he deserves it, but the Mets have to step up too, and Lindor's not playing perfect either. He's had some catastrophic mistakes. But, this is just getting pathetic. Are the Mets even going to finish with a winning record at this point? And they are way behind my expectations for them that I made for them, at the All-Star break. They are way behind those predictions. They have just completely lost their steam, and they're somewhat in a tailspin right now. And I don't think that they're going to be able to get out of it. Obviously, if they sweep the D-backs or even take 2 out of 3, then my opinion will change on the matter, and I'll think that maybe the Mets can have a chance, especially if the Braves fall off. But it really is now or never for the Mets, as they need to attempt, another huge standings jumping to get it. I know that they were able to do so from where they were on June 2nd and get into a playoff spot by July 11th, but and they were 6 out, but they're going to need more heroics. They're going to need to go on another 16-4 tear, and with their schedule, I don't see it. What's really disheartening is that we saw teams like the Padres and Diamondbacks, who weren't playing great at the All-Star break and had similar records to the Mets, if not, even slightly worse record than the Mets, and now they're in serious contention for the number 1 seed in the NL, along with the Dodgers, Brewers, and Phillies. But the Mets were unable to step up to the challenge, and, and they're fighting for their playoff lives right now. And they blew another opportunity. They need to have a big boom heading into Arizona, and I don't know.